I'm somewhat being a little kind to myself. After, I don't know how many presentations, lectures we've done, but it's around about 16, 20, something like that. And I'm going to today field a general Q&A, question and answer session. I feel that we've gone over a lot of material over the last 2.5 months, and undoubtedly there will be some questions. And as I said, I'm being a little kind to myself as well. Let me see, actually, there's a couple of things I need to do. Oh, I don't know if that's going to work. All right, well, so yesterday I streamed with my lovely wife, Evita, on her channel. We talked about practice, actually. And I had 2 microphones. I wonder if the sound is all right, or is it kind of weird and echoey? Anyway, I have stereo sound today. Maybe it sounds good. I don't know. I am doing my nails because they're getting very long. Anyone else on the internet would find that that's a bizarre thing to say. But of course, we are bizarre together. So, Mr. Dave Belcher is in the chat. Michelangelo's there from Cairo. Hello, Michelangelo. Roger Ramirez asked, what is your favorite color? Which is one of the great questions from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. I would say it's actually turquoise, like aqua, and honestly, it was one of the reasons I chose the color for CGC, that blue. There's a particular type of blue. It's not, got a little bit of green there, a little bit of green. So I would say that's my favorite color, the CGC blue that you can see there in the logo, the lighter blue. Yes, and of course, it is the Roger Ramirez's birthday today. Happy birthday, Roger. Many happy returns. Maybe everyone can wish Roger a happy birthday in the chat. So it's great to see familiar names and people saying hello. Jeff, James, Stephen, Carlos, thank you so much for being here. Kerry, Martha from St. Louis. Yes, a lot of happy birthdays going on in there. That's great. Rick Lord is there. Hello, Rick. Andrew from the UK. Oh, great. A lot of people in here. Great to have everyone here. So, hey, Dave is also doing his nails. We're all probably doing our nails. It's kind of a nice thing to do every now and then, albeit a little bit messy. Black top is not the greatest color to be wearing while doing one's nails. So great to see everyone. Ah, May Capoeira is there. That's a great name, May. Am I saying capoeira like the sort of the dance form? Or I guess it's a martial art actually. That's right. It's a martial art that is like a dance because of some of the situation in the country when it came about. Renee from Newcastle, Australia. Beautiful town. Wonderful beaches up there. So today is going to be all about you and your questions, and I know there are quite a lot because over the weeks there have been a lot of questions, and sometimes I wasn't able to answer them. So we talked about scales. We did 4 scales workshops. We talked about the cage system. We talked about alternation. We talked about how we can use scales to improve our playing. We did a lot of harmony. 4 weeks of harmony workshops where we delved into pieces of repertoire. Yesterday, I talked a lot about practice. I'm actually writing a book and have been writing a book for some time, and that's definitely one of the chapters is on that. So I spoke quite a lot about practice yesterday. That was actually to a group of dancers, but ew. Brent said he's doing his toenails. I guess I don't know why that's ew, but I'm just being silly. Yeah, and so we talked about practice. We've interviewed a few people, yeah. So May was saying it's a martial or camouflage as a dance. My name sounds more like my than it is. That is my cup. With the name, it means mom. Oh, mom in Portuguese. Oh, very nice. Very cool. Well, lovely to have you here. Glad you could make one of the live streams. Huh, very cool. So, This is going to be a very, very laid-back session unless we get some questions coming in. So please do think about some questions. Maybe you had them. We can delve back into some of the harmony. We can look at scales. I'm doing my nails so that I can play if need be. Or maybe you can ask some questions about where you are at in your playing right now, some of the struggles, some of the things you're working on, maybe some direction. I know, Martha, you had a question you put in on email about stamina with pieces. And yeah, so if there's any questions, I will be happy to answer them. Okay, so Buster Crap asked a question. You played the first, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. You played the first few bars of Capriccio Arabe only with one finger on your left hand. Why was that? I'm not sure what you're talking about there. Because maybe you can rewrite the question. The first few bars is that opening sequence, and it wasn't played with just, oh, right hand, okay. Did I? Well, first of all, let me, you mean the section that is, sorry, I'm gonna get my right hand camera set up here. You mean the sort of florid introduction? That would definitely, I'm not sure. Sometimes I will admit that I'll play, you mean? I definitely do not play that with one finger. I'm alternating. I, slur, M, slur, I, slur. I know you can't see my right hand, but I'm just alternating through that. Maybe this section. Definitely alternating and moving things around. I will say that you can use the same finger in a repeated fashion sometimes to get a particular sound, a really consistent sound. I've done that before in like this, so I'll just, instead of getting the camera, I'll do, I'll start with just those first few notes, and I repeat my finger because of tone, but it's always, whenever I repeat fingers, hopefully, it's always intentional rather than unconsciously. That's the goal. Okay, I saw some questions coming in. Yeah, all right. I'm so glad you have this angle of the camera, because this side, which is the table, is full of stuff. Okay, let's go for some questions. I'm gonna answer Ahmed's question first. So it's a kind of a broad question, but an interesting one. Should I buy classical or acoustic? So classical guitars are normally the ones that have these nylon treble strings, and the bass strings are wound with steel, and acoustic guitars have steel strings on the top 3 strings, and they have much higher tension, and it has a different sound. So traditionally, those instruments have been used for different styles. The classical repertoire is often played on this classical or Spanish guitar with those nylon strings. And it has to do a little bit with tone, has to do a little bit with the design that facilitates the kind of music that we play. Steel string acoustics can often be quite a lot louder. They can project more because of the higher tension of the strings and the way they're built. And they have slightly different necks, so they're more conducive sometimes to chords, and as opposed to wider classical necks that are a bit better for the intricate finger work that we do. You can play any type of music on any guitar. It will just have a particular sound And the feel of the guitar also will be a little different between those instruments. So I would say if you're really interested in classical repertoire and you want to play that music and you want to study and develop tone, and especially playing with nails as well. If you have hard nails, you can get away with playing with nails on acoustic strings, but if you have soft nails, they might break a lot with steel strings. So often people, if they have the luxury of it, will have a steel string acoustic to play for folk, rock, bluegrass, acoustic music, and then a classical for that as well. Classical guitars are also widely used in bossa nova. They're used in folk music, but you can play other styles of music on those guitars. They just sound different. So you're the only one who can answer that question, Ahmed, of whether it should be a classical style or acoustic, because they sound quite different. Brent asked, I would like to know a recording or two that influenced me. Yeah, okay. So the most important recording, I think, was, and maybe a lot of us can sympathize or have a similar story to this, is my grandmother gave me a recording. I don't know who the performers were on that CD many years ago, back in the 90s would have been. But I remember it had Villa-Lobos Chora #1 and the Prelude #1. It was a classical hits kind of album, and I just fell in love with the sound of the music. So that, I don't know what that album was, or it was just given to me as a gift at the right time, and that's where I sort of fell in love with that sound. Now, I will tell you that recordings I've listened to over and over and over again. One of them, I don't know what volume it would have been, but it was sort of the collected hits of Julian Bream. Especially his recording of the Aguado, Rondo, and A minor. I listened to that thing endlessly and rewound it. So many. I think March and Dilla I've listened to a lot of. Pavel Steidl. I'm trying to think of particular recordings. I know Paul Galbraith, his sonatas and partitas, I listened to that a lot for many, many years. Because his playing is kind of otherworldly a little bit. He plays on an 8-string instrument, held at more of a vertical, almost cello-like angle. And he is a phenomenal musician, plays gigantic pieces in concert from memory, and it's really a sight to behold. So have a look out for Paul Galbraith if you haven't heard of him before. So those are a couple of recordings, but definitely Julian Bream. That was who I listened to the most in my early days. And very influential. That's an interesting question. So Cipriano asked, better put these up on there. How can we use singing to help practice? So singing is something that's often recommended with frequency by teachers to say, oh, you should sing this passage. But yeah, why? Why does that help? Well, the answer, in my opinion, is that when we sing, there's certain technical requirements that get taken away. We often can sing, or it doesn't need to be good singing, but we can often sing with a lot more fluency than we can as play on the guitar, especially when we're beginners. So singing allows us to be immediately expressive and play around with phrasing. We don't have to worry about all the technical things we're learning, and it lets us be quite free with our musicality. It therefore allows us to play around with things that might take us years to feel freely on the instrument. So just because we were talking about this before, so something like that, right? We can get very caught up in the fingers and a lot going on, so we might go all sorts of things. But just to go, so it really becomes much more natural and fluid, helps us phrase, helps us shape things. All of these tasks, which can be sometimes very demanding on the classical guitar, to have crescendo and accents, and they come much more fluently for many of us through our voice. So it's a really lovely way to kind of take a shortcut to musicality. Thank you for that question. Pepper excuse me, said, I'm truly having a problem with bar chords on my classical guitar. How can I play bar chords clearly on the Romance? Yes. So Pepper, when she says Romance, is right. This is that famous Romance that we all very much love. The first thing I'll say about that Romance is often it is classed on random internet sites and forums, and perhaps even by some teachers that are not too familiar with the progress, as a beginner piece. It is definitely not a beginner piece. It requires quite a lot of Barre technique in the second half, especially. So number one is, if you're in the early stages of development as a classical guitarist, I would suggest to take on another piece that's in the same style, but a lot easier on the left hand, is the Study in E minor by Francisco Tárrega. You can hear it's got the same kind of motion, and Barres, but just not as frequent, not as challenging. So that's the first thing that I will say. The second is that Barres do take time. I've worked with many students over the years about getting Barres, and I find that the universal factor is that when we reach the challenge of developing a Barre technique, it takes time. So you do need to be patient. A lot of it has to do with fine-tuning your positioning of the finger and the angle of the finger. I would suggest by starting out by just barring 2 strings, and then we want to play around a little bit with the angle of our finger. I often suggest to have the finger on the side of the finger, as opposed, some people try and do it flat like this. Now, René Izquierdo, in his sort of Barre technique course that we have at the Academy, does use a bit more of a flat finger. So you're going to find different approaches, but my approach is to recommend on the side of the finger. It's a smaller surface area and a bit more bony, so it's easier to hold down those strings. So what actually happens with the left hand is you make a little bit of a C shape, because our finger is on the side and our thumb is further in the middle of our hand. So it's not squeezing like a pinch like that. It's actually, if we were to take the hand away, it's more of a C shape. And there's actually quite a lot of leverage we can get with that hand position. So turning it on the side, having a thumb a bit further up, maybe 1 or 2 frets up on the fingerboard. And then it's good, this is where the work comes in. It's a lot about learning how very carefully to place that finger. And obviously for a while you might get buzzers, often underneath the little joint area there. And the last point, I'm sort of skimming over this a little bit, but the last point is that we want to use Barres as infrequently as possible in our music, because very often we don't need a Barre when we're holding it down, or we're holding down more strings than needed. So every time you have a Barre, see if you can do a little detective work and see if you can either remove the Barre in total or make it an easier Barre. So that's some sort of tips, if you like, on the Barre technique. Cool. I'm just scanning down. There's a lot of questions. It's great. Thank you. I'm going to sort of see if I can keep my answers brief. I know Jeff had the question. Okay. How do you keep up the same level of dedication and consistency I go in? Well, I'm sure everyone can have a familiarity with this question. How do you keep up the same level of dedication? I don't think anyone does. I think we all fluctuate. I think that we need to acknowledge that we fluctuate and be kind to ourselves when we end up putting as much time. Don't have to beat yourself up and feel guilty about it. I think one of the best ways to sort of hack our dedication, our mental fortitude, is to be involved with others. I know that at this time it's not as easy, but if you are in an ensemble, if you're in a guitar orchestra, if you have weekly lessons, if you have anything, the member challenges at CGC, an exam coming up, all of those things help keep you on the path, help push you a little bit when your dedication wanes. So that's my opinion about how to best sort of move forward. And we always want to encourage joy in our experience so that it's a virtuous cycle of dedication and results. And so making sure you also think carefully about your goals and what you're trying to achieve. If you're going for really big, unrealistic goals, it's very easy to get disheartened along the way. So I think involving yourself with other people as much as possible, and also setting goals and projects along the way. Sultan has a question about memorization. Is there a recommended way to memorize a piece of music for a long time with minimum memory slips? I believe I wrote some of this on the blog at CGC, an article on memorization. My approach to memorization is that it's a little bit like getting to know a person. So we can have a very flat 2D idea of a person if we only know, let's say it's a celebrity, right? We only know them from being in a movie or something, or on stage, and we know their public persona and what have you. We know what they look like, there you go. That might be equivalent to physical memory of a piece, right? We just play things through with enough repetition that we rely on our muscle memory. Now, if we take this analogy of a person further, the next step might be if we get to spend time with this person. We have an outing with a group of people, and you get to talk to them a little bit and see them in another situation. You really start to get a different knowledge of the person. And then another level would be if you spend one-on-one time with that person. Then, of course, further is that you spend a long period of time and through different situations, even maybe extreme situations. You really get to see this person. And over 10 years, there becomes a profound understanding of who that person is. Same thing goes with music. We have our initial flat understanding. Often it's muscle memory. But as we dig deeper, we listen to recordings, we analyze the harmony, we hear it a number of different times and spend time with it. We experiment with fingering, we experiment with phrasing. All of these things build a relationship with the piece. And when you get into a performance situation, when the memory slip is inevitable, because all a memory slip is a little blip in our concentration and focus, and that's going to happen to everybody. We need these safety nets to catch us, and you can't just rely on muscle memory. If you ever have been asked to play a piece from this measure, and you say, well, I have to back up and start back here, that's muscle memory. That means you don't have the familiarity there. There's also a practice element which involves making sure you start at different places and work on phrases and little segments, as opposed to always starting at the beginning or the beginning of big sections. So there's some nice overview stuff there of memorization. Nicoletta Tedesco is here. And of course, her birthday is on Sunday. A lot of great people are born in the month of May. So maybe we can give a little happy birthday to Nikki in advance as well. Andrew asked, on the nails theme, I broke my thumbnail gardening yesterday. It's a good reason. Gardening is a good reason to break a nail. And probably can't play or practice for a week or so. Any suggestions for a way to practice without actually playing? Absolutely. I mean, let's just rule out, for argument's sake, all physical practice. Because I think in some ways we can still play on the guitar and do certain things. I mean, if it was your thumbnail, then we could still do left-hand slurs or shifting. There's a lot of things we could still do on the left hand, and also a lot of things we could do with IM and A scales, all that kind of stuff. But let's say for a second you just can't actually play the guitar. I think there's so much to be learned from doing a listening session, sitting down with a whole album and getting all the scores and listening as you go along, doing some research, doing some reading about the composers that you're working on, context, listening to music. If we're playing Carcassi, go and listen to some Beethoven piano sonatas. If you're playing Villa-Lobos, go and listen to some Chopin. Like the Chopin etudes and the Villa-Lobos etudes, that would be a wonderful listening experience. They're very much closely aligned. If you're playing something that's an arrangement like the Giuliani Rossiniana, go and listen to the Rossini operas. All of that kind of stuff is all the work that we often don't do. So sometimes when we can't play the guitar, it's a real good opportunity to further our relationship, if I'm taking an analogy from before, with the pieces that we're playing. So Dave Reed asked, oh, no, that's not Dave Reed. Can you share thoughts on how to work through a plateau in the learning process? So I guess it's different to Jeff's question about feeling like your dedication. Plateaus definitely happen. I think that sometimes we can be working on pieces and get diminishing returns, and that it is of benefit to sometimes just change things up, change different pieces, take a break. Sometimes that gives us clarity. Trying, what do they say? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results, right? So maybe you want to change things up. Maybe you want to take a step back and look at how you're working and be a little strategic in your time allocation and the materials you're using. Maybe you could check in with a teacher, just a one-off, saying like, this is what I'm doing. Can you give me some guidance? You think that's going to keep working? Now, having said all that, we all hit plateaus with our playing. I sometimes like to think that when we feel like we're sometimes getting worse almost, we have actually improved in that we now understand tone or music at a higher level, and we perceive our own playing differently. The most common one there is where people start hearing their tone differently. It's like, oh, my tone's gotten worse lately. And as a teacher, I say, no, I think it's the same. You're just hearing it a little differently now, which is a great thing, because that means you've opened up this area for improvement. So I have usually quite a positive take on the feeling of getting stuck or even going backwards. It could be a nice, productive thing. Daniel asked, can you please talk a little more about micro practicing / focus during practice? How much repertoire should we practice at the same time? Sure. I'm of the opinion that less is more in terms of the repertoire. From what I don't know for you specifically, Daniel, because it's going to differ from person to person. But I would say in general that we don't spend enough time with the same piece or the same exercise or the same technique. If you spend more time with it, really dig in, find the point where you hit a plateau and push past it, then you really start making inroads. So micro practice might, whenever I ask someone, almost without fail, if I'm on coaching calls and things and I ask someone, can you just play these 2 beats? Dee-da-dum, dee-da-dum. And we're practicing because we're focusing so small, a little tiny shift. People have the tendency to just keep going. They want to keep playing more. And it's my job as a teacher to rein it back in and say, nope, just that, just beat 4 and 1, beat 4 and 1. And sometimes it takes a few minutes. Same thing with slowing down. Say, could you please play that? Well, let's do it really slowly. Let's play it at the same speed. No, really slowly. And after 5 requests, then it starts to slow down. So if you can be the kind of player who really takes that focus practice, spot practice, and slow practice and make it work for you, it's going to yield such good results. But you need patience, and you need to stay with these things for a longer time. I tend to have 15-minute chunks. You use a stopwatch and work on a phrase, a little section. About the 10-minute mark, you're going to start feeling maybe bored, maybe frustrated, and wanting to move on. And that timer with the extra 5 minutes there is wonderful because it pushes you there. And that's usually where you start making the real advances or consolidating the work you've already done. So 15-minute chunks with the stopwatch, if you like, and also really focusing in on your material. Less is more. Gary asked, have you always played classical, Simon, or have you ventured into other styles, jazz, rock, and do you play any of the instruments? So yes, I started out on the electric guitar. Actually, no, I started very young on the cornet. It's kind of like a trumpet. It was when I was about 5. And then I started playing electric guitar. The first piece I ever performed in my life was Stairway to Heaven. Nice. On my little blue Samick electric guitar. And I quickly found that I wasn't really into songs. You know, like everyone always said, can you play this song, play that song? But I was only really interested in instrumental music, so I would often play... I was into Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, Eddie Van Halen, Eric Clapton, who's obviously got words, but a lot of instrumental electric guitar music. Very virtuosic, very instrumental. And then I started getting frustrated that I couldn't play this music on my own. I needed a band, I once played with a band when I was younger. So I gravitated towards classical because you could play the entire piece on your own. And there was a virtuosic, it was intricate, and no words. It was sort of really what I enjoyed. In addition to the guitar, I definitely played electric and acoustic over the years and played in different gigs, but I also played mandolin, had a bluegrass band for many years. We haven't played for quite a while. Last time we played was at the summer school, but I really enjoyed playing mandolin. And I can play some jazz. I sometimes play jazz along with Evita. So those are the other things that I play. So... Lynette asked, this is a little bit, sounds like there's a common thread here. Any help on motivation to become unstuck and get moving with curriculum? Greatly appreciated. I think it feels similar to some of these other questions. I wonder if it's a little bit about asking the question, it's like, are we actually stuck? Are we really stuck? Because things take time to develop and improve. And it's not always going to be giant revelations every single practice session and giant leaps of ability. So I think sometimes we say we get stuck, but that's also just part of progressing, you know? I think a lot of it's mental games. We can sometimes... One approach is to just look at the positives and have some affirmations about our own playing. If we really are stuck in a particular way of playing for years, that might be, you might really want to look at how you're working, how you're spending your time. You might want to, if you're really diligent, record a practice session and go back with a pen and paper and be like, how am I actually spending this time? But do know that you need patience to get through the curriculum. Things take a while. One of the most interesting moments in the podcast was when I interviewed Chris Mallett, a wonderful teacher out in California, and he teaches Suzuki. And I said, how long is the longest you've ever spent with someone on one thing, one piece? And he said he spent 2 years on Twinkle Twinkle with this young student. 2 years. Now it's impressive on the student's behalf, but for me, I'm impressed on the teacher's behalf. That takes an incredible amount of patience and conviction with what you're doing and how you're teaching. Because he said once that student passed that point in their development, they really flew. You know, they got all the bits and pieces set, the fundamentals locked in, and then they had a great launching pad to move forward. So if you haven't been on the same thing for 2 years, you're doing well. You know, it's within the realms of reality. So hopefully that sheds a little bit of light. I know it's maybe not the answer people are looking for. They want a key to unlock the next level. And the closest thing to that is understanding really how we use our time. But I do think for a lot of people, patience and self-kindness is a big part of that. Okay, Carrie wanted to follow up on Jeffrey's question. When do you like your sound? Did you practice differently once you found that consistent accuracy and quality? Did you Did you practice differently once you found that consistent accuracy and quality? Did you have it before you went to Yale or afterwards? The answer comes a little bit into play with what I was talking about before with your understanding of sound. I messed around with my nail shape until I feel like I was confident with it. Yeah, around about the time I went to Yale. So we're talking at least 10 years plus of playing around with nail shapes leading up to that point. So if that gives you any kind of context of still experimenting, still trying to figure things out, I think many of us are satisfied with our sound until we're not, because and like I said before, if you're not satisfied with your sound, it means you're probably just hearing yourself more objectively. Especially now we record ourselves so much. I never recorded myself until we had those little portable recorders. And that was, I'd already been in the United States at that point. So I think the recording process helps with that a lot, like having recorded a couple of albums, but you get that objectivity. So yeah, and I think sound is also tone quality, something that fluctuates. You don't reach a point and say, and I'm done. Technique is in flux. We have to take care of it, kind of like an athlete. We have to take care of it. Sometimes we're really in form and our sound is good. I will tell you since starting CGC and since becoming full-time with it, my sound has fluctuated a little bit because my projects dictate my practice. So when I have concerts, I'll be practicing a lot and my sound gets a lot better. My playing gets a lot better. But there are definitely more dips in between compared to when I was a student. So, and everyone else has got those realities. You've got kids, people have jobs. So there's things that take our time away. Svetli asked, what do you think of Yamashita? I think amazing. Yamashita's a phenomenal Japanese guitarist who took on these giant projects like Pitches in an Exhibition. And he is one of the few players that can kind of pull it off because he has a grand way of playing the guitar, big movements, big sound. And there is a world of guitar that isn't always pretty and neat and clean. And I can see a lot of virtue in that. I can see virtue in other ones as styles as well, but really phenomenal play, very distinct, very unique. Yeah. Highly recommended if no one has seen Yamashita play. Here's his name. Martin asks, how long have you been seriously practicing or playing the guitar? Classical guitar. I think I started classical when I was about 15, 16, and I'm 37 now. Yep. So someone else can do the math for me. Oh, interesting. Jeff Chan, what has been my most satisfying moment as a teacher? I think I was asked this question a while back on a live stream. There are many. I don't know if I have a most. I think one of them undoubtedly was the first summer school that we ran for CGC. And the reason is there was a couple of moments where I sort of just took a breath and took a moment and looked at what was happening and was so grateful for all of the efforts and contributions from all the different people, because it takes a village, as they say, but it happened and it was there and it was something and it was people and it made a positive impact in people's life. So that was probably one of the most profound experiences I had as a teacher. Yeah. There are plenty of others with a lot of individual cases, but my favorite ones on a smaller scale is usually when people figure out something, where we've tried 3 or 4 ways to think about something and it doesn't really click, and then eventually through analogy or example or something, it clicks, it starts working. It's like, yes, it's like you're a cheerleader for the other guitarist. Carlos Hi, Simon. Even though I have been playing steel string for 1,000 years. Oh, impressive. As a beginner on CGC, how do you gauge when to move on from an exercise? Right. Yeah, it's good to set, and I think I need to be a little bit better throughout. We are doing an audit of the curriculum right now, and I think I need to be a little better about setting those goals to move on. Like, not everyone, it's hard to set goals because you don't know what you don't know. But with certain exercises, we're definitely not looking, it's a balance between staying with it, usually longer than you think you need to really become familiar, and moving on because you get diminishing returns, and you also want to balance your enjoyment. You don't want to get frustrated and bored and angry. If you have the capacity to stay with something a little longer than you're comfortable with, I would err on that side. So, for instance, you don't want to move on from something the moment you can do it. If there's a scale at 60 beats per minute with certain stipulations, articulation, and you get it, you finally get it after whatever, half an hour, a week, what have you. Don't move on just yet. Stay with that, because remember that our body knows what we repeat. So if you've only gotten something correct or satisfactory to your goals once, that's not enough. That doesn't mean it's there. You need to repeat that correctly many times for it to be actually reinforced in your technique. So we have to use our judgment. The vast majority of us here at CGC are adults. So we are experienced learners. And so use that judgment to say, I can really stick with this a little bit more. I think I can get more out of it. You want to feel confident. You want to feel in control before moving on. One really great thing in the academy is that we see people do their exams. And I think that's over the time really lifted the quality, because we see examples of people at different stages and different iterations, and we get a good idea of our own context. So, Logan. Hi, Logan. I am a beginner classical guitar player. Can you explain the specific way the finger is supposed to play the string with as well as without nails? This is a little bit of there's sort of a whole series of lessons on this in the academy. It's a little bit of a challenge to do this quickly, but I'm going to try since you asked. I'm going to have to, let me see. Is this going to work? Maybe not. I'm trying to... That's unfortunate. I don't know why I'm not getting this other camera. Excuse me while we have technical difficulties. That's very odd. 1 second, I'm going to check if the old thing's plugged in. I'm going to try the old turn it on and turn it off trick. Hey, it worked. After all these years of learning about technology, it's still really a matter of turn it off and turn it back on. Is this going to work? My little... okay. Hey, there we go. Okay, so with nails and without nails, more or less the same. You want to think about going through the string. Don't pull up. Rather, think about the finger coming back to the palm. In that motion, we're pushing the string back and down into the guitar. It's much easier to get this motion with a rest stroke because it goes into the guitar. You're pressing into the guitar. We want to get a similar kind of activation with a free stroke. Now, we don't bring in the finger all the way to the palm. every time, but that by doing that, practicing with that follow through, gives us the right direction, not up. Now without nails, it's not too much different, to be honest. Very much a similar approach. You're just going to get a slightly different tone quality. There are players out there that as kind of specialists with no nails, and I'm not one of them. But the technique is more or less the same. There's not too much different. It's going to get you a different sound, and so you might find you have to manipulate the fingers a little differently to get different sounds, but that's more or less it. Sorry, I feel that's kind of a very light skim over a topic that I could talk a lot about. Anyway, hopefully that's of some interest. Oh yeah, so Nikki was saying that, yeah, yesterday I was featured on my wife's YouTube channel. We talked a lot about practice, and actually, yes, it's called Syncopated City. I might actually put that in the academy. It was a nice talk on practice. Hey, James Erickson. Hi, James. James is one of our teachers at CGC. Great to see you here. Daniel asked another question. Let me just zoom down. Ooh, there's a lot. I don't know if I can get through all these. It's great. Thank you for all the questions. Gosh. Now I lost my spot. Here we go. Okay, this is going to be the lightning round now. It's sort of like 12 minutes left. Daniel asked, has your journey as a musician been what you envisioned it to be? No. It's different at different times. You know, I think I'm not sure, sometimes I'm not even sure what I envisioned it to be. I definitely was much more competitive as a younger player. I wanted to show people what I could do. I wanted to show off. I wanted to be the best. I wanted to be the fastest. And I lost that completely at a certain point. And I don't know why or where it went. But now I get motivated by building things, creating things, and I get motivated by the energy through Classical Guitar Corner and Nikki and Dave and James and Sonia and all the people involved. You know, that's what fuels me now. Building something that's worthwhile and means something. And that part, all of this CGC stuff, I never would have guessed way back when. Also, I was much more self-focused, selfish perhaps when I was younger. No interest in teaching for a long time. It was only when I did my doctoral thesis that I started getting interested in teaching. And I just thought it was fascinating. So big changes along the way. And I'm sure it'll be different in another 10 years. All right, I'm gonna have to cherry pick some questions here. So I apologize if I'm gonna not answer your question because there's quite a lot. Marco Cosentino asked, should we make an effort to learn all the notes on the fretboard or just let that happen naturally? I would err on making an effort to be more familiar rather than letting it happen naturally. The only way it's going to happen naturally is if you play repertoire that uses that area of the fingerboard more readily. Examples of that would be Tedesco, Castelnuovo Tedesco, Rolandians. You know, a lot of more modern composers are use more of the fretboard, and that helps us learn it. But in general, if we're starting with the sort of beginner classical repertoire, we're really based down in the first couple of positions. So I would make an effort to learn the fingerboard up in the higher positions. It's going to make learning those more challenging pieces that much simpler. I'm not sure about this as a question. I'm a self-taught classical guitarist, and a few months ago I've started eliminating and relearning proper habits and techniques through books and masterclasses on YouTube. Encourage us, mate, please. That's great. I think that's great. I was always a big autodidact. You know, I was happy to sift through a lot of materials to find the stuff that I deemed good. And if you're a good autodidact, you can do amazing things, especially with the internet. I mean, just there's everything out there with great teachers, great information. You just have to take the time to sift through that. So go for it. If that's how you learn, that's fantastic. Brooke asked if there's anything I've been working on in my pieces. Yes, I had pieces I was working on for the summer school. I'll have to say that it was I've also started composing a little bit. I got inspired by hearing the duets come out, and then I often come back to revisiting pieces by Bach. So I've been playing through the Chaconne a lot recently. Yeah, Martin suggested to have Gary Lee. Yes, I had that same idea. We should definitely have him tune in and show us around the workshop. Tefko asked, please recommend a list of pieces for a beginner to study and learn. Thanks. That's a big question. We created this whole curriculum book. It's not a plug for the book, but I'm just saying like there's, a whole curriculum there with that, answering that very question. What pieces to play in what order? A really nice place to start is Saw Opus 60. Fernando Saw wrote that as an educational tool, but a lot of good other resources as well. The grade exams from Trinity, Guildhall, Australian Music Examination Board are a good place to start. Okay, I am just cycling through some. I'm going to see if there's a question that pops out. Robert, we did talk about memorization a little bit earlier. And there's an article I think Dave posted on that as well. The old spruce versus cedar. Do you play your spruce guitar much, or you're all sold on cedar? I will say, so I have two guitars by Paul Sheridan, one spruce, one cedar. The cedar one is still the one that resonates with me, no pun intended. The spruce one is very powerful and kind of stark in its energy and very focused. Evita loves that spruce guitar. And I think it would be wonderful for chamber music, so punchy. But for playing here in this apartment, I always tend to go back to the cedar. It's a beautiful instrument. Karen said, can you suggest a decent classical guitar less than $500? Whenever it comes to those guitars in that price range, I would say the best thing you can do is go to a guitar store with an experienced guitarist, because those guitars are all production line guitars. Well, I assume most of them are. And you can get some really good ones. But you need to kind of know what you're listening for and looking for. So go to a store, and in the generic answer that I have for you is a Yamaha C40, I think they are, or C100, and a Cordoba C, I think it's like C7 is one of the earlier model. Cordobas, they're so big as a company, relatively speaking, that they can give you good quality quite cheap. Okay. That's a nice question. Jenna asked, hi Jenna, she asked, any favorite approaches to returning to regular intensive practice after a chunk of time spent away, like a few months from the guitar? Yeah, I like to reconnect with sound and the sensation of playing. I will play some really nice basic arpeggios, rolling arpeggios or open strings, and just reconnect with that love of sound and the vibration of the instrument. I think it's, you always want to feel in control and positive as much as we can. So simple things, enjoying that sound, little simple studies that are maybe way below your level of ability, just playing, enjoying that. That's what I like to do, just to reconnect with the instrument. And then I often will go into technique, because technique for me is the fastest way that I elevate my playing back to its former glory, if you will. Not so much pieces. So please, everyone, please remember some of these questions if we have another Q&A. I'm so glad there are so many questions. I'm very grateful. But I think I'm running out of time and out of voice a little bit. Do I use a glass nail file? No, I use this little guy. It's a little diamond. I don't know why they call them diamond nail files, but it's metal. And then for polishing, I use these little buffer pads. Greetings from Wales. Yes, I'm a Powys. I've yet to go to Powys Castle, but nice to meet a Welshman, Ollie. Oh, it's Adam. Hi, Adam, and Dave. Thanks for tuning in. Eduardo asked, how long did it take you to master the tremolo technique? I don't think I've mastered it. I played a few larger tremolo pieces. I love Sueño en la Floresta. It's such a beautiful piece. And I love the fact that it's not all tremolo. And so that was probably the most intensive time that I did tremolo. And it's a really intense look at your right hand and positioning and nails. And I really am a believer that tremolo comes out of an excellent right hand technique in general. And it's one of those things I think you need to spend some time with building up the evenness and sound of it. So I can't say I definitely would not say I mastered it. So I can't answer that question. In progress. Are there any plans to expand the selection of pieces at different grades? Absolutely there are. We're just trying our best to keep on top of things in general at the moment. But yes, we will keep expanding the repertoire for sure. We have a big duet project coming out soon. So there'll be a lot of duets coming into the Academy. A whole book of duets. Oh, I've reached the end of the chat. I thought I was kept going. All right, I'm gonna the last question I'll deal with, and I do apologize if I skipped your questions. I saw a number of ones going through there. But this is an interesting question. I've thought about this a lot. What is the main target as students when we must pursue for music sight reading? Is it to play music in our head or to know easily how to play music or quickly or both? It's a really interesting question and an interesting topic, which I have thought about a lot. So sight reading is often conflated with the ability to read notation. And I think they have different purposes in my personal view. So sight reading is not necessarily to be able to play the piece perfectly, right? So people's goal is often to be able to read and learn a piece quickly. And of course, the ability to read fluently will help with that. But sight reading, the ability to play music at first, a prima vista, at first sight, is useful for getting an overview of a piece of music you've never seen before. It is useful for playing in ensembles and just jumping in and playing music. It is useful for being a student and working with a teacher when the teacher says, can you play from here? It is useful for being a member of our musical community at large, so we can have a common language and be fluent in reading music and integrate with piano players and violinists and all sorts of things. It is not so much a skill about reading music and learning a piece of music. I see them as two different things. So sight reading, it also doesn't need to be perfect, right? So this is the big point. Sight reading for me needs actually to be fluent. It's about being able to play in time. Yes, there might be mistakes along the way, but you need to keep going and stay with the music. This is an integral skill to being an ensemble musician, and sight reading that's the virtue of it. Now, if you're talking about being really familiar with the fingerboard and reading music, yes, that will absolutely help learn music quicker, more quickly. But it's not sight reading. It's not sight reading anymore after you've spent some time with that piece, if you understand what I'm saying. So the reason I think we need to pursue it as students is so that we can converse fluently in a musical language, and that we can integrate and not be so isolated from other musicians and just play like a kid would play with music. So it doesn't have to be a daunting thing to read music. And then alongside that, we need to develop our music reading ability in general so that we can be better learners. We can perhaps perform from the music. You know, sometimes people perform with music, but it's a hindrance rather than a help because their reading skills are actually not that great. And it's just going to increase the learning experience and all the communication that goes along with that. Yeah. All right. So Karen says, thank you. Thank you, Karen, for being here. Thanks, Daniel. Cipriani wishing Nikki a happy birthday. Yes. And Roger, of course. He may be gone now, but happy birthday to Roger. Thank you for the kind words coming through. That's a big, Brooke asked a big question. In 100 years from now, how do you think 21st century's plays will be regarded? I have no idea. Given the current state of the world, anything's up for grabs. This could be the halcyon days of the world. You know, it's like we had things at our fingertips. We could order them through our door. We have music. We can talk on the internet. I mean, this could be great. Sometimes it's nice to acknowledge this might be the best we ever get it. It sounds negative, but I'm trying to be positive. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Brent. Really appreciate you turning up each time. It'd be lonely without you. I've been receiving some recommendations and thoughts about future ones. I will bring more people on. It's actually more to do with my getting my act together. I have a lot on my plate at the moment, and that's great. I'm not complaining at all. But sometimes it takes a little while to schedule calls with other people, and I will be doing that. I just need to get a little ahead with my organizational schedule. So, thanks everyone. Thanks for letting me take a little bit of an easy ride and just answer questions. That was really great. So many questions. So we might do another one because there were so many. But have a great weekend. It's in the United States here. It's a long weekend, so enjoy Memorial Day weekend. Go make some music. Thanks everyone. Bye.